So I want to share some thoughts here on hypnotic regression because I had a question come in via email regarding this, and I'll read the question to you. It says, James, I read in one of your books that it is best to avoid all forms of regression therapy. I've been studying root cause therapy where regression therapy is one of the main tools used. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on what the possible harms of regression therapy are so I don't harm anyone in this way. Thank you so much. Now, I was confused when I received this question because I thought that was an odd thing for me to have said. It didn't feel like a thing I would have said or seem like a thing I would have said, that it's best to avoid all forms of regression therapy. So I did ask for clarification, and it turns out the quote is not from my Hypnosis Without Trance book. It is from my old sort of, I don't know, you could call it an ebook, PDF, Hypnosis Beyond the Trance Myth. Here's the quote. It says, for the most part, hypnosis is safe and enjoyable, providing you pay attention to your subject's health and safety, and even safer when you stay away from quote-unquote trance, and especially from any form of regression. Please remember that you have a duty of care when hypnotizing to both your client and any spectators. So I want to give some context here. This was Hypnosis Beyond the Trance Myth. This was the first time I'd written anything really publicly that I released publicly about my approach to hypnosis. And it was looking at things in a street hypnosis context. So the last thing I wanted people doing was started messing around in a street hypnosis context with regression or anything like that, because there is a sort of risk involved with regression. But what I'm absolutely not saying here is never to do this work and to always stay away from it and there's no value to it and it's just dangerous or anything like that. There is no question in my mind that what people call regression therapy is useful and can be useful. It is also absolutely clear to me that it is often not necessary and that there can be risks involved in it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, what I think about it, when I use it, when I don't. I just want to say something about the term regression to start with. I don't really believe in regression. I don't really believe that we're taking somebody back to how they were. And I certainly, when I take somebody back to, let's call it a root cause, although I have problems with that term, because there is no root cause, there are just significant events. Okay, they always sit within a web of other meanings, of other experiences. There's no root cause. We do not work in a linear way. But that aside, what I want to do, if I'm going to take somebody back to an event that has had a significant impact on them, that they have made particular meanings about that are limiting them going forward and creating bad experiences going forward, for me, that's not about regression. It's not about revivification. It's about taking somebody back in a resourced way so they can relate to it differently and reweave that past experience into a different form. Okay, so I prefer the term re-membering. Okay, so play on the word remembering, but if you look at how that breaks down, it's again, membering means putting together, putting together, remembering. And this is what remembering means. So we're having somebody remember something in a particularly vivid way, but we are influencing how that memory is held within them. And this is based on the idea of the reconstructive nature of memory. Every time we access a memory, we open it back up for rewiring in some way. So that's what I'm doing personally if I ever do this kind of work. And I'm not trying to turn it into an absolute fiction. It's just that the issue often is the conclusions that were drawn from the experience about who the person is, whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether they're capable or not, this kind of thing. It is the meaning making and the sense making that is done around the experience. This is my belief of it. This is the way I approach it, that causes the problem, not the experience itself. So I'll give an example of this. I recently worked with somebody a young lad who's in the army, and he was doing extremely well in the army, top of his class. And he then went on a night out in Eastern Europe with a few lads for some R&R. And there was one lad in particular who didn't really want to come out, but this fella I was working with, this young lad I was working with, convinced his friend to come out for the evening. And they went out on the town, and his friend never came back. He disappeared and was found dead in the river. And it was all very horrific for my client. my client since had been experiencing, he had not got an official diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, but I have absolutely no doubt that had he gone to see a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist, he would have received such a diagnosis. It is not my business to diagnose people. I do not work with diagnoses. However, so this kid's life had kind of spiraled down from this point. The thing that he kept saying to me is like, he'd been going back over it and over it and thinking, had he made different decisions, had he made different choices, maybe his friend would be alive. And he kept going over the fact that his friend was so looking forward to going home on leave and seeing his family, and he would never see them. Because he was replaying certain things, and he felt a tremendous sense of guilt that him inviting his friend out had led to his death. It was a choice that he made, he believed, had led to his friend's death. Okay, now my work with him was to transform his relationship to that experience and to draw new meanings from it so as he could be at peace with it. And part of this meant letting go of the survivor's guilt, because often in situations like this, you get an issue of survivor's guilt where it's actually people don't feel that it's okay for them to have a good life when a friend or colleague or loved one or whatever has not had the opportunity to have a good life because they are no longer alive. So in this instance, I did what I would call remembering work. That's taking the person back to the experience and having them relate to it from a number of different perspectives and weave new meaning out of it and really come to a point where they can kind of be at peace with it, or at least considerably more at peace with it than they were, have a freedom around it that enables them to kind of move on with their life instead of being perpetually held back by what happened in that experience. So this is an example, and it's an example of what, if that was a PTSD diagnosis, that would be, I think, considered to be a simple PTSD because there was one specific event. Now, is this event the root cause of this person's problem? It's a significant emotional event, and it would have activated the way that it did depending upon that person's values, that person's experiences, their understanding of the world, the sense they made at the time. So it's not really that that's the root cause necessarily, but it was a significant emotional event, a significant event in the matrix of the problem. So the way I tend to approach regression is I do not believe that we always need to go to root cause at all, or to the significant emotional event. I do not think we even really need to touch the past much, but some clients wish to do so, and sometimes in sessions it comes up. So I have a bias towards being present and future focused, unless otherwise dictated by the client or what comes up for the client. So I don't go looking for root causes. You know, sometimes it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. And people who say, well, you know, if you don't deal with the root cause, then the person will never really be free from it. You're just skimming over the surface. I do not believe that is true at all. We do not have to touch root causes in order to get transformation, but we can, and sometimes it's useful. So I'll do that kind of work myself when it comes up. If it spontaneously emerges from the client's description, or perhaps I'm doing some more future-focused work or present-focused work, or difference-focused work is a better way of putting it rather than going into the problem. And it just keeps sort of trying to bubble up this event. Then I'll do it, or I get a sense that there's a spontaneous regression occurring, which can sometimes happen. Then I'll go and do the regression work. So why not just do it anyway? Why not just go for it and do it anyway? Well, here's the thing. First thing to remember is that if you are going to go back and work with the past, it is absolutely essential that you take a more resourced version of the client back to the past material. Okay, the person has to be more resourced now than they were when the event occurred. So first of all, you want to absolutely make sure you're connecting people to resources before you go back there. If you take the same version of the client that was traumatized by that past experience back to that past experience, you're not really going to get much good stuff happening. Okay, all you're really likely to do is re-entrench the the sort of traumatic quality of the experience. So that's the first thing that I want to say about that. That's one reason why I'm always going to be going for resources and difference first, regardless of whether I go back and do that past work or not. The second thing is, if you take somebody back and you can stabilize them in resources, you've got resources anchored, you're probably going to be okay. If you're not that familiar with doing that work and you take somebody back and they start to really get absorbed back into the past experience, they maybe start to what's often called abreact. They go into kind of the body activates a lot of the fight-flight systems again, and they start kind of really losing it. If you get this happen, you need to be very, very good at managing attention, at working very directly with hypnotic suggestion. Actually, I think doing a lot of street hypnosis got me quite good at doing this. Being able to shift somebody's state radically out of where they're at. Because that old idea that if you just let somebody stay in it and abreact, all is good, I do not believe that is true. And I think this is fallacious, and some approaches to regression work say that's all you need to do. Take somebody back, have them abreact, and it's like striking a match. Once it's burned out, all the potential's gone from it. That's not true. That just isn't true, in my view, okay? You want to do more than that, right? You need to bring them to a different experience and a different understanding of those events and a different set of conclusions drawn from them, right? They need to come away seeing it in a different way, not just burning out some apparently held emotion. Okay, so if someone's going to go in and they're just going to kind of abreact, it is my belief that this will do them no good whatsoever and possibly more harm. And that's what you want to avoid. This is why I say to people, don't just go skipping along and going, hey, I just have to take people back and abreact them and all will be good. We'll clear out their past. That's not really, I believe, how it works. So that's why I would suggest that people stay away from it unless they know what they're doing, they know how to handle abreactions, they know how to be grounded in themselves and not freak out if the client starts freaking out. That's absolutely the worst possible thing that you could do. If the client starts freaking out, you start freaking out. I just say this as well. I particularly will avoid doing regression work or remembering work, if I can, on Zoom or on the internet. Okay? Now, I'm not saying this is an absolute rule. If I've got a good sense that the client is well-resourced and can stabilize themselves and keep on top of the process, they're really empowered in the work and in the process, I might well do it. But if I'm not sure about that and I know that I need to be present, I don't really want to do that on Zoom because Zoom can get glitchy, Zoom can get laggy, sometimes the connection can drop. I don't want to be in that place. I'm much more likely to do that work when I'm in a room with somebody where I can get into their field of vision, I can shift their field of vision, I can get them up, I can get them moving, I can shift their state in a lot more ways. And of course, I'm not going to disappear out the room, which can happen on Zoom. So those are just some considerations around doing regression work or remembering work. I don't think there's anything else really to say there. I think it can be incredibly powerful. I've done a lot of this kind of work with people. They found it incredibly beneficial, incredibly releasing, but it's not something I would encourage people to dive into recklessly. And I know when I first started doing it, I had a few messy experiences. Let's put it that way. Okay, if you've got any further questions about this, of course, please do ask. And if you benefit from this video or audio, please do like it. Please do subscribe to the channel and please do let people know that this facility is available.